Welcome to another episode of What Teachers Have to Say. My name is Jake and...
Nathan.
Why is it always so awkward?
It is awkward.
My name is Jake and I'm a teacher.
We teach
school.
school.
It's like a support group. Sometimes education is a support group.
Sometimes it is. We're going to talk a little bit about that today.
Today's a good one. I'm really excited about today. So we're talking about mindset.
Yep.
And specifically, we're linking that to a system called the EduProtocols. Many of our listeners are familiar with it. If you're not, don't feel left out. We're not going to be diving really deep into the protocols themselves, right? We're talking more about mindset and this shift, because I think I would say that ubiquitously in education, we know that there's something not functioning.
Yeah. We all sense
We all sense it. We're trying to right the ship. We're trying to do this stuff. And so we're going to be talking about these 4 specific shifts in mindset that bring us to a healthier place. And they fall within the bucket of EduProtocols. So we refer to it as the EduProtocols mindset, but it is by no means isolative to that.
No. But it definitely was the impetus behind EduProtocols.
It was, because we've lived and experienced
Yep.
the shift that...
And if you want to hear a little bit more about that, go back and listen to the John Carippo episode.
Carippo.
He was one of the original authors of the EduProtocols framework in book 1, along with Marlena Hayburn.
Yep.
Good stuff.
Good stuff. And away we go.
So, Jake, you just got back from Notre Dame.
I did. It was crazy.
Notre Dame.
I know.
Our boy got into
And
Notre
not the
Dame.
high school.
Right. No, the private university.
I'm wearing my merch
in
for people that are
Indiana.
on video. I was like, I got my Notre Dame hat.
Look at that.
And check it. I actually went to the bookstore and they have an entire embroidery shop inside the 3-story bookstore at Notre Dame.
embroidery
It ain't Chico
shop?
State.
Okay.
Right. And so I got my EduProtocols branded.
Dude.
Cap. I know.
Okay.
I'm rocking it.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
got
you're
it all.
rocking
I'm
your
even
whole
wearing
merch.
my
Okay.
EduProtocols merch. One of the...
So
It's not even official merch. Just like one of the teachers that loves it. It's like, hey,
Whoa,
here's a
really?
shop.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so a bunch of people are wearing
That's
it.
way cool. So, we've talked a little bit about EduProtocols. We've mentioned it. We've had some guests on that are big in the EduProtocols community. We had John Carippo, Kim Vogie, both authors of EduProtocols books. This guy's also an author of EduProtocols book that's yet to come out, but it is submitted.
It's been, either it has or it will be very shortly. I'm not in charge of that, but we gave the okay.
Right. That's awesome. So I know there was a lot of buzz around your book at this at this
really exciting.
academy.
Yeah, we call it an academy, right?
Right.
It's super pointed sessions, right, of learning different EduProtocols. If you're not familiar with the EduProtocols, we're not going to belabor that. This is not going to be a show about the EduProtocols. We want to talk about the mindset behind it, right? Because it's just really good, solid, modern teaching
practice.
So the mindset that underpins and supports all of the EduProtocol stuff it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It saved my career.
Yeah.
Right?
Definitely.
Totally applying for jobs outside of education.
Kim would say the same thing. I know.
Same thing.
She does.
Many teachers. So so little caveat: if you want to learn about EduProtocols, this won't really be the venue for that.
Right.
But Nathan and I do a show called ELA Unleashed on the EduProtocols Plus network.
Yeah.
That's one of the only paywall things of EduProtocols. It's very
very
much about open source sharing information. The Facebook community.
Yeah, definitely join the Facebook community. If you're interested in that. We mentioned
community.
that in Kim's episode, but really it is the most positive place on the internet.
It's fantastic. It's almost like 11,000 people now.
Wow, really?
Just slinging resources, free resources.
That's crazy.
I know. I love this community.
Yeah.
I mean, you do too.
The way John talks about it, it's just his crazy teachers.
Yeah.
His group of crazy teachers.
Yeah.
And then, now we're all kind of...
Sometimes he calls himself EduGrandpa. He started when he was teaching.
Gramps?
Yeah, he's the EduGrandpa.
That's amazing. Oh, wow.
Yeah. And we told Kim that she's the EduHermana.
Oh,
the Edu sister.
There you go.
She's our sister. Shout out to Kim Vogie. I love her. But
so
it's great.
Yeah. I mean, we talked a little bit with John about what the impetus behind EduProtocols really was for him,
Yeah.
and why he was trying to accomplish with writing the book, with coming up with the whole idea.
Yeah.
And so the mindset behind that, let's get into that.
Yeah.
Where it's
like, really important. Because he and Marlena Haburn is the other co-author of the books.
Yeah.
And yeah, they taught together in California in like 99, I think is when they started. It's been a long time.
Yeah, that is.
And it really just came out of like, this ain't working. Mm-hmm. Like, have you seen the stats on growth in education? Like, it's flatlined. Like, we essentially haven't grown in decades. Like, I don't remember. John shares a chart that's shocking.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like since the early 70s, like there hasn't been notable growth.
Right.
You know, and those are fighting words sometimes.
They really are.
Right? Because I like it kind of takes, and this is a part of the mindset. Mm-hmm. We should say, like, there's not an official, like, this is the EduProtocols mindset. Like, we just came up with 4 things today.
No. And it you know, and this kind of aligns with a lot of other educational theory that is out there and that has been out there for a really long time. It's just, we have been stuck in these same kind of modes that we're wanting to break down.
Yeah.
And you have to let go of some things.
You gotta let go. And like, I always try to say like, hey, like, so I teach one called Wicked Hydra and it's really fun. It's about questioning protocols. And one of the things that I make sure to say when I'm training is like, hey guys, like we need to take some of the onus that like we have trained students not to ask questions.
Yeah.
Like we have as a profession, and we're doing better, and we're moving away from it. You know, like I'm reading this book John suggested called "What Schools Could Be" by Ted Dintersmith. I super recommend it.
Yeah.
I'm about halfway through, so if it goes off the rails by the end, don't like come at me, right? I make that mistake all the time. I'm like, I love this book. You should read this book, and then it turns into like chaos and Game of Thrones at the end. I'm like, oh, that's really embarrassing.
Yeah.
But no, and he Ted Dintersmith, he visited like schools for an entire year. He just traveled around the United States looking at like, what are we doing? What's the state of education? Mm-hmm. And dude, he said, like, soundbite, he was like, we don't need to get better at doing the old things. We need to do better things. Oh, I know, like, ow. You know, and so, you know, I'm not a baby in the bathwater kind of person. We do a lot of beautiful things in education, right? And also, like, the needle hasn't moved. It's only gotten more expensive. Funding has gone way through the roof, and it hasn't seen that. So it's been my experience, as some people that are listening have like, well, yeah, like EduProtocols is one of the ways,
right?
You know, I've seen it change the needle.
Right. It's just, it's a framework that shifts where the teaching is happening, actually, where it's like, you know, we think of teacher to student, right? Where the learning, and our classrooms are even set up that way, right? You have teacher up front, students all in rows facing the teacher. And this is how
separated from each other.
Most classrooms are set up that way, not as a communal learning environment whatsoever. It doesn't build community. It's actually really hard to build community in a space like that. You know, I feel like most educators have had some experience related to that, where you're in a room with 30 to 40 kids. They're all in rows staring at you. And they're not even supposed to talk to each other, right?
Yeah,
like that's bad.
Children should be seen and not heard.
We've trained that out of them.
Right? We've trained it out of them.
Then what do you have? You only have, I am the expert and I am infallible.
Yep.
And you are the learner, and knowledge will come out of me and into you somehow.
Just receive it.
Somehow. It will be
sage
received,
on the stage.
Right?
And it
sage
doesn't
on
work.
the stage. And yeah, like
it probably did work at some point, but like culture has shifted.
Maybe it did.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, there's writing that goes back to like you know, Lev Vygotsky is very trendy in some circles, where like the zone of proximal development, it keys into like child psychology, how we actually learn things. But even like going further back, like John Dewey was writing in the 30s.
Yep. Rudolf Steiner.
Experience as Education, where he's talking about like our schools need to be different. They need to they need to engage and challenge students in a different way. We can't just expect knowledge to come from one expert and somehow get into the other person without them actually being involved in or taking ownership over their learning.
Right.
And that's really, I think, where the shift needs to happen, where it's like you have to instill in students the fact that they're responsible for their own learning. So that's like a whole shift that you even have to coach into your students.
Right. Well, and that's like the first shift that we wanted to talk about, right? Like moving from teacher centric to student centric. And those are like buzzwords, right? Like the whole child, like what does whole child mean? Like, do you really talk about whole child, right? What does it mean to be student centric? And to me, that's kind of the beginning. Like, can you remove yourself? Can you remove your ego from the classroom to stand at the side of a student instead of like, here's me at my, lectern.
Right. Yeah.
I'm the one who has all the knowledge, except, excuse me, like, sorry, buddy. Like I can look up most of that on my phone now.
Yeah. Now with AI and coaching on that as well, it's like they have an expert at their fingertips at all times.
Yeah. For that like basal data, but to show them how to navigate it, that's, the guide, the mentor, the person to help shape it and to like applaud them along, and keep them going. It reminds me of a story. There was I believe he was a physics professor at Harvard. This is in that book. What schools could be. And very honored physics professor at Harvard, and his students always did really well. And then he kind of realized that like they can they can spin off Boyle's law, and they know all the theories and everything. They've got it all there, and they weren't good at solving actual real world problems. Right. There was something about dropping something from an airplane that he used to test, and they couldn't do it well. Right. Of course they could muscle through it, but they couldn't do it well. And so he shifted the whole focus of his program, came under fire from the rest of the department, shifted the whole focus of the program. And the students still got their high grades, right? Because mom and dad really want that. Yeah. We are still in a system that we have to somehow work within, right? Grades do matter. I wish that we could move away from that. But and so they began actually outperforming other physics students in like categories. Whoa. And then he would do this thing, testing them on real world situations, and they began to do them. Like think critically and creatively, applying knowledge. Or like how many times do we see this? I was just talking to somebody at the conference, and they're like, I'm so frustrated because I teach grammar to these kids and sentence construction and variability of sentences and types of sentences, and they know them and they can do them. And then when they write me a paragraph, it's like 5 simple sentences, one after the next.
Right.
Like that application of knowledge. That's where we miss it. But so this Harvard professor, he knew that he had kind of like done something well when his like rate my professor stats started dropping because they were saying, they're like, I've never learned so much in a physics class, but I wish the teacher would have taught me something. You're like, oh, sweet summer child, you missed it.
Huh. Yeah. Might have missed the point.
Yeah, to help that mind shift, I think is really difficult to it's hard to plan. It's hard to make that shift from like, just ask me and I'll give you the answer.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
It makes me think about in Waldorf education, you're actually trained to not answer children's questions. Yeah. And that sounds like heresy, right?
Yeah.
To sometimes.
Totally.
And so that's a beautiful example. If anybody out there listening finds this article, I can't find it anymore. It was part of my master's degree. And it was actually like a pastor of a church that wrote it, right? And it was talking about how he was driving home with his daughter one night. She was like 2 or 3, just very young. Okay. She was in the car seat in the back, and she said, Daddy, like, the moon's coming home with us, because she was looking outside and she saw that the moon was tracking them, right? How that happens to a child.
Right.
And he said that like one of the big regrets of being a father that he has is that he was like, oh no, honey, that's actually not happening. It's because this is happening. It only looks like that. It's an optical illusion, right? Instead of being able to say like, interesting, why do you think that is?
Yeah.
And too often we think we own the answer. I own the answer, so I'm going to give you the answer right now instead of letting you come to the answer. And that takes time.
It does.
And trust and faith.
It does.
And people are out there are like, yeah, but my kids are disengaged. Yeah, they are. And it takes some time to get through there.
Yeah.
Building a whole culture, which we've talked so much about, building a culture in the classroom. I think that leads really seamlessly into the second point, right? The second form of mindset, the EduProtocols mindset. It's that it's not about a single lesson or a single unit or a progression of lessons, right? It's never one and done.
Right.
It's all about iterative learning. And I learned about something, it's not new. It's new to me, called ipsative learning.
Yeah,
where it's
that one.
And so actually John Kripo was in India, and that's where he stumbled across this about a year ago. So ipsative learning is when the learning refers back to itself. And so like the student learns something, and then the next time it refers back to what they learned. And so it's a little bit like spiral, right? Like spiral pedagogy.
Sure.
But it's more like, what do you know? Let's continue building on it. It's not like, here's your one lesson on fractions. Now you know it. Let's move on.
Right.
Which we know doesn't work.
Right. Because it's not really building on anything.
Yeah. And so that mindset of moving away from, we're doing a compare and contrast. Great. You've learned how to do it. Now you can apply that knowledge somewhere. Like, no, students need more than that. And so the mindset that we move into being iterative or ipsative learning. And so now it's like, I'm going to teach you, I'll reference an EduProtocol here, like the cyber sandwich. Cyber sandwich is it's a Venn diagram, compare and contrast, type of a framework that you can do. And so some people are like, yeah, but like if you're doing high reps, if you're going to do cyber sandwich over and over, isn't that drill and kill?
Right.
That's the common thing. Like, isn't that just drill and kill?
Actually, at first, when I first got hired here and was talking with you about EduProtocols, it did something about it did smack of that to me. Where I was just like, this really sounds
it's like doing multiplication chart over and over and over and over and over and over and over.
Thing.
Yeah.
But it's not that it's the same thing.
It's
because
not.
It's never the same assignment.
Yeah,
really.
and so
it's
as I
just the
understand it, I'm going to ruin this definition, but like drill and kill is rote memorization, doing the same thing over and over and over until they quote master it.
Right.
And I have a big comic quote in there, right? Where the mindset that we want, the EduProtocols mindset, the mindset of modern education, is we're going to do the same type of thing.
Right.
So this cyber sandwich, right? That's the heart of EduProtocols, is to teach them how to go through a process, how to do a framework or a protocol. And then when they know how to do that, because you've done it really simple and kind of funny, like, we're going to compare Whataburger to Smashburger, when they know that, I don't know why I chose those. I've never been to either of those restaurants. I was just in the South in Texas, so like that's in my thing. But so, doing that compare and contrast process over and over with different forms of knowledge, different forms of content, ipsatively revisiting the process over and over and over. It's new every time.
Right.
But it gives the students that time and space. You trust them to continue chipping away at it. And it kind of freaks my students out when I'm like, we'll do an assignment in class and like somebody didn't finish, right? I'm sure I'm the only one that has that happen, right? And I don't make a deal of it. I'm like, no worry, you're going to get better at it next time. Just make sure that you next time, can you get a little further?
Yeah.
And they're like, but like, did I lose points? Like, no, I'm not grading that anyways. It's fine. Let's move on. They're like, okay, but like I didn't finish. Do you want me to take it home? I'm like, no, I want you to chill. You know?
No, I want you to calm down.
Yeah. You know, drill and kill would be like, I want you to do that 5 times, then come back and see me.
Right.
But no, it's constantly moving away from that idea that like it's one and done. I'm going to teach you sentence construction right now.
Right.
And I hope you pick it up.
Right.
Because we're moving on.
Right.
And, you know, now we have students with so many learning gaps. Not their fault.
Right.
Blame the pandemic, blame whatever we want. They have learning gaps.
They do.
And we have teachers.
This is coming.
And this is where I'm gonna offend somebody out there. That's okay. Hit me up on the comments. It'll drive engagement. It's sad to me, right? It is hard to be a 5th grade teacher trying to teach certain math concepts, and they're coming with a 1st grade knowledge. Right? That's hard.
That is
a lot.
That's a mountain to climb.
But I've witnessed it where teachers just kind of disregard that. And districts force it too. They're like, no, you got to stay on pacing guide. Like a good friend of mine moved to Florida and was literally written up for getting off the pacing guide because she had to move backwards and teach kids concepts that she didn't know. And she ended up just dropping the mic and walking away from that school district. But those are the districts that are out there. And so, you know, that idea of, well, this is the one time that you have to learn that, and you're going to learn it to a certain level, and that level needs to be mastery the first time you do it. Or like, we're going to do it for 4 weeks.
Right.
It doesn't function.
Yeah.
And so moving to that iterative mindset, we're going to do the same type of thing, and we're going to chip away at it, and we're going to dig deeper and deeper, and you're going to feel successful, and you're totally going to screw up at some point, and that's okay, because I'm not the sage on the stage. I'm your soccer coach.
Right. And I think that is where that mindset comes from, where it is almost like coaching. And, you know, even if you go back and listen to the John Carippo episode, like he's such a coach. He's such a coach at heart. And I think that kind of comes from it too. And I actually feel really lucky because I had so many other teaching experiences that were outside of school that really kind of where I cut my teeth on who I was as an educator and defined for myself what I wanted to accomplish. And one of the biggest like impacts on me was teaching music. And you were a music teacher as well.
Yeah.
And so it's like, if you have taught music, you understand that it all begins in chaos.
Right. We did the A flat scale already.
It all begins in chaos, and that you need practice.
Yep.
And you need to practice, and you need to develop a whole like habit around practicing. Otherwise you're never going to progress as a musician, and you are going to have to practice the same kinds of skills in many different contexts. Like if I teach you how to play AC/DC Back in Black, like you're going to have to learn some concepts, some ways to move your fingers with the guitar and with the strings that will transfer to other areas. You're learning these little tiny skills all along the way until you can play a whole song, until you can even expand your knowledge to understand the frameworks of how music works. Like there's a whole depth of learning that can happen. And, you know, luckily in most situations in music teaching, there isn't a pacing guide for you. There isn't a set point you have to get to.
Right.
So you get to take those kids from where they're at.
Yeah.
You meet them where they're at, and then you move forward from there.
And the the concept of regression is understood in music.
Oh, totally. Like I'm rusty.
Yeah, I'm rusty. It's not, wow, you need to go learn that again on your own.
Yeah, no.
We're moving on. Like that, like, oh, we're going to bring it up. And I love that you brought up like Back in Black, right?
Sure.
Which works really well because we're drinking Liquid Death, which is just water, by the way. Feel free to sponsor us, Liquid Death. We love you. You know, when you're learning Back in Black, you still have to draw on proper holding technique, arching your fingers, all of those kind of basal things. but maybe you forgot the beginning of stairway.
Right.
And then you're just going to pick it up again. It's that, like we understand this in other models, and yet for some reason, we've placed this syntheticness, that's not a word, syntheticality. I can grammar good. We've placed this synthetic, non-real expectation.
That's so forced.
You're like, oh, well, you have a check next to your mastery learning, so I guess you know it still. You're like, no, that was a year ago. Like, I forgot that. That was before my house burned down. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And that, I think that's really hard. That's a hard focus to shift to sometimes. And now, oh my God, I keep getting myself in trouble, but that's okay. I think that often that's not the teacher driving it.
Yeah.
I think that that's a district level
I think so too.
thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I might be very wrong out there. Like, feel free to call me out on that.
Right.
But teachers at their heart know that.
Yeah.
They feel that. They see that. And
You're
yet
on the front lines of it.
They systematically have to follow certain things. Even down to like the Common Core standards, which I actually like. I like standards. I think that they're important.
Yeah.
But they are like, well, I have to do this. This is 4th grade material, and we're in, you have 3rd grade material, so I don't know where you're going to pick that up. And that just doesn't work.
No, it's so segmented, in a very arbitrary, very strange way.
Yeah.
And like how you were saying it, synthetic, sure. We know that people don't learn this way.
I sure don't.
I definitely don't. I have to return to a concept over and over again. I need to practice it. And then I'll get rusty on it too. I'll forget about what I used to know, but it'll come back to me as soon as I pick it up again. And I think that, like summer break, by the time you get them back, that's
regression.
Don't know anymore.
There's there's a really cool thing out there called the forgetting curve. Oh. Like, you should Google it. We should all Google it. But it's that like time, like over time you forget things. And that's why like high reps and iterative learning is good, because it lessens how deep that forgetting goes.
Totally.
I feel like I'm saying that weird. But over time it begins to level out because you own the skill, because you've brought it up, you've recognized you're rusty, and yet it wasn't 6 years ago that you learned something, and so the forgetting curve drops so far down, right? And I love that you said like it's so segmented, right? That's like another part that I really wanted to talk about today.
Yeah.
In mindset, it's about moving away from isolation into collaboration, right?
Yes.
And those are keywords. Those are hot
They are.
words,
They're
right?
hot words.
We like
They're
saying those
definitely
words.
in education,
but not just students working together in a group, right? Like a lot of EduProtocols is group based, and people are out there cringing right now because they've been through the absolute hell of group work. It can be. It can be awful.
It can be rough.
Like I did all the work. Yeah. We know that. That's out there, right? We combat that on a daily basis sometimes. It's okay. Yeah. But it's not just about like getting students to work together. It's about getting teachers to work together. And not just like a vertical groups planning session for vertical alignment. It's about that understanding that like, okay, so let's talk real. Like I am expected to teach apposition and parallel structure in grammar, right? And so I could just teach that. But the truth is, kids come to me and they have no idea what verb agreement is.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a few steps
They have it natural to them.
Right.
But they don't understand it. And so shifting that mindset to say like, I'm going to collaborate, even if it's just thought-based. I'm collaboratively going to work with the teachers who came before me and the teachers who come after me. Like if I can pass them on, if I were that teacher, what do I want them to come with?
Yeah.
Like that collaboration. And it's good to do that actually in a physical space and talk and work together and be in each other's classrooms. And sometimes that's, you can't, there's not space for that. Right.
Yep.
We know like the term to cloister yourself off. It happens. But so I think that a big mind shift is that it's saying like, I do not teach in a vacuum.
No.
I, as a human teacher, have to collaborate with not just my vertical alignment, but also like, what is it that I can do that benefits their chemistry class? Right?
Yep.
So like, my wife is great at this. Julie is Julie. Julie's
Yeah,
an incredible
Julie's
teacher. I've
awesome.
talked about her before. She's a 6th grade and like one section of 7th grade history teacher. She teaches probably more ELA than some ELA teachers.
Wow.
Like she actually was commenting that she'll go into another classroom and she'll see her kids turning out like garbage work, like no punctuation, sentence
like, what are you
fragments, all of this stuff. And she's
Yeah.
like, "What is that?
What are you doing?
What
in
is
here?
that?" And they're like, "Oh, well," and it goes back to that expectation, right? They
Right.
weren't expected to do something. And so that collaboration, saying like, I don't teach in a vacuum. Yes, I can close the door to my room,
Yeah.
but that is synthetic. There is no separation between, these kids, especially in a high school, they're moving all over the place.
All over the place.
Oh
man, high school has got to be one of the most strange experiences
So
you'll ever have in
weird.
your life.
I know, we pretend like they come in and like, now we're doing English.
No, I am a poet.
Yeah.
It's like, what were you a half hour ago? I was a dodgeball thrower.
I know, it's so crazy.
It's like, okay. It is a really strange sort of like artificial environment that we have created and that we have upheld for so long.
It is the factory model and it's functioning the way it was intended to.
Yeah.
It's just that we don't want the same widget that they did after World War I.
Right. And then there's Sir Ken Robinson talks a lot about this. Had a couple TED Talks, and I don't know, there's just a lot of educators and educational researchers that have shown and have interrogated this model for a really long time. And yet the curriculum that we buy from major publishing companies, the districts that we have choosing that curriculum for us, the entire environment that we have is not human. It's like not humanistic. It's just like it does like stand in the way of these things.
It really can
but
sometimes.
That doesn't mean that you can't make some shifts in your in your classroom, even if you don't have your like-minded people around you, even if you do have a curriculum that you have to get through. EduProtocols isn't a curriculum, and neither is the mindset behind EduProtocols or any kind of skill or technique that you're bringing to content. So in the EduProtocols community, like you'll see posts a lot, and I know teachers are like planning their years right now and like trying to plan out content
for people who might be off track. Like it's 19th of July.
When we're filming today.
So people have like paddleboarded for a while, and now they're like, I better start thinking about
and you'll see people ask for, hey, I don't have XYZ protocol set up for Of Mice and Men, or whatever, or I don't have these materials for this specific content, and that is like they're halfway there. You're halfway to this mindset shift we're talking about, where it's like it doesn't matter what the content is. It's actually just skills and practices for approaching content.
So now, not to say this like content isn't important, right? Like especially in physics and chemistry. There's some things the content, but the skill trumps the content.
Right. Like I don't have to have all of the materials prepared for a specific content. I can start throwing these things in and trying things out with whatever I want.
Well, and we have educators, we've been trained to do that.
We have.
Right? Like open up the Houghton Mifflin binder.
Right.
Okay, we're going to teach this one story and it has this one worksheet.
And here's the pacing
guide. You hear my voice going, it's so bad. It's so
we hate
bad.
worksheets.
They have their time and place, but Yeah. And it has broken the creativity of the educator.
Yeah.
So, I love that you're saying like, like another EduProtocol is like an iron chef. Okay. So you think of it as like a fancy jigsaw, like a jigsaw model.
Yeah. These are things that just good teaching techniques
like
that have been around for a long time.
I've started going in and doing consulting work, and I do conferences, and I do classroom takeovers, and I train teachers one-on-one and things like that. And I'm always saying like, hey, I know this is going to sound weird because you've paid me to be here today.
Yeah.
But I hope I don't teach you anything brand new.
Yeah.
I hope what I do is show you a more economical way to do it.
Yep.
Our motto, teach better, work less.
Yeah.
Like it's a thing.
Exactly.
It's actually a thing. Like this English teacher leaves his bag at work.
Yeah.
I don't grade essays all night long. Not happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That in and of itself, I feel like people wouldn't even believe you.
No, people don't.
Because
people
ELA
100% don't.
ELA is such a high workload most of the time.
Or they say, and this is so sad because this is just like where our culture has gone to. They're like, oh, well, I bet his students aren't doing very well. Ooh. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh.
Yep. How can you be a good English teacher without having students write a ton of essays? Nope. Mm-mm. We do like one a semester because we're not focused on the fact that it's an essay.
Right.
We've stripped it down to, I like to call it the brass tacks, right? The skills. An essay is just, I talk about this in the book, by the way.
Yeah.
I talk about weightlifting in classrooms.
Yeah, you told me
I've had you read it.
I bounced this off me.
Because I am out of it right now, but I like weightlifting, powerlifting.
Yeah.
And I realized this is actually a good segue. Just go with me. So there was this guy named Prilipin. His last name was Prilipin. He was a Russian that like revolutionized everything we know about weightlifting. Like most of what we know right now comes from Prilipin.
Wow.
And the Bulgarians, like how to train,
and
how to train, because during a relatively short span of time that he was in charge of the Olympic lifting of Russia, they just crushed the world.
Wow.
And then everybody learned from it, and the whole element became elevated. And one of the things he does is periodization. So he's like, okay, don't go into a gym and lift your max weight over and over and over and over and over. That doesn't actually build muscles. The way that you do it is a combination of isolated lifts and compound lifts. And so you're like, okay, the compound lift is the squat. Or like the deadlift. Let's talk about
where you're
deadlift.
Engaging lots of different muscles.
Yeah, and so the whole chain, right, from your heels up your back all the way into your head, if you're doing it right, like the whole body is engaged.
Yeah.
And it's exhausting.
Yeah.
Right? It's exhausting. And so Prilipin talked about like, okay, well, you should do that because it's really important to do your max lift. But you should also do the squat at 60% of your max and 40% of your max for higher reps. This is where the like weight versus reps thing started to come into weightlifting. And then he also took it, which was really meaningful to me as I was watching my coach, Michael, teaching this. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is education. This is what I need.
Yeah.
And it was that the essay is the compound lift. That's the deadlift, right? It's hard. Yeah. That's a lot. You have to know sentence construction and grammar and research and how to do an MLA source citation and what is a margin?
In-text citations.
So much of that stuff.
Of that.
And so in my classroom, with many people, and this is part of that shift in focus, it's not about the essay anymore. Why am I not afraid of AI? Because they're not doing that. Right? I'm not afraid of AI. I embrace it. Super. Because I strip it down. So we work on paragraph construction. We work on sentence construction. We work on grammar. We work on research. We work on outlining. We work on all these things differently, which is the isolated lift. Right? So instead of doing a deadlift over and over and over, I'm going to do arm curls, and I'm going to do Romanian deadlifts, which just works certain parts. I'm going to isolate the individual muscles, and they're all going to grow together. So then when it's time to do the compound lift again, when it's about 3/4 of the way through the semester, when I'm like, okay, guys, here's your essay.
Yep.
They recognize, they're like, wow, like that was not as bad as it could have been. And for a high schooler, that means like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
And when I ask them, like, what did you grow the most in this semester? They always say, like, oh, I'm way better at writing essays, because they have to write essays for a lot of other classes.
Sure.
Right? Like our history class makes them write a ton of essays.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, well, how many essays did you write this semester? And they're like, well, there was the, you know, there's this like really awkward moment. They're like, there was the narrative piece, one?
Just the
Like,
one?
yep, just the one.
Just the one.
You know, and that goes to
That's your
shifting
deadlift.
away from content to skill.
Yeah.
It could be just like you brought up, like, oh, we're doing of mice and men.
Sure.
Often, like, it's easy to get into that trap, especially in an English class where we're
totally.
not content based at all, right? We are all skill based. But you're like, oh, I'm teaching of mice and men. And that's where, like, I'm going to say it, like the crappy questions of like, what color was the mouse in George's pocket?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. You
None
know,
of
like,
those details actually really matter unless you're
Like-
reading some really high literature where everything
Right.
has a metaphor to it.
you know, and like, we're not teaching that content. Now,
No.
this is my world. English is my world. A history class is a little different. A science class is a little different. A math class is a little different. You have to have that content too. But my wife, I talk to her a lot about history because I see her a lot.
No way.
I know, weirdest thing ever. Happily married for 22 years, 23 now. And she's like, I don't even really teach dates anymore.
Yeah.
Right? It's not the thing. Like, nobody cares what day Archduke Ferdinand was assassinated. I can Google that. I could literally, I don't want to say it because it'll activate, but like I could ask my phone right now and it would give it to me
Right.
in seconds.
Yep.
You know, but great. You got it on the bubble test. You know that on X date that happened. Cool.
Yeah.
But what does it mean?
Yeah. What
That's
changed?
the thing. You know, like you can teach the date, but what you really need to do is teach the how, the why, the how did you come to think about that? What does it mean that he was, Princip assassinated him? Why did he do it? Oh, it was connected back to collaboration. It was connected to the Serbians. It was connected to the royalty. It was connected to all these things. And then it spawned World War I, which then spawned, decades of civil wars, which spawned World War II. And so you can get focused on the frickin' date
Right.
or the skill of critically analyzing, which is hard.
It is. And developing the curiosity in your students to
I need to take a
move in
breath.
those directions, right?
I'm a little passionate about this.
Yeah, no. It's skills that they don't have
Yeah.
and haven't been pushed to develop that are really outside of curriculum.
Yeah.
They really are. They're all of those habits of learning that have not been instilled in them.
Right.
And
That weird learned helplessness
yeah,
that we've put it in them.
yeah, like what John, well, he was calling it. I'm calling this baby birding.
Oh,
is
yeah,
what
right.
he was calling it. Where it's just like we're chewing things up for students and giving it to them. We're giving them to fill in the blank. We're giving all of these things where the participation required of students is actually pretty minimal. And when I got my freshman class, which I handed off to you, that was my goal. I was like, we need to strip it down. And I really want you to learn like two things.
Yeah.
I really want you to learn these practices and these ways of being in education that will serve you moving forward.
Yeah.
You can get the grammar.
Mega-
I know Jake's going to get you with the grammar.
Mega compound lifts.
Yeah, exactly.
So what were they?
It was really like I wanted students to understand the context for any piece of writing and the subtext of what was happening in the writing. And I really just hammered those in so many different ways, in journaling, in like having students pick their own books to read and read those. It didn't matter what the content was. It mattered how they were digging into it, how they were thinking about it, how they were structuring their thinking around it.
Well, and those two things require so many skills.
So many skills.
Foundational skills that we kind of forget. You're like, oh, you're missing. You don't know how to write a letter, but I'm asking you how to write a sentence.
Right.
Like metaphorically.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, it's all of that. And you wanted to talk about.
Yeah. So
I think this connects.
It does connect. Back to that, so we've talked about, let's just revisit. We've talked about 4 main shifts, right? So we have shifting from teacher-centric to student-centric, right? The ability to stand to the side, coach from the side. You're still there.
Yep.
Right? Go back and listen to Ted Lasso.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
But he's not out there playing.
No.
He's not even telling them how to do it because he doesn't know.
He doesn't even know.
But so moving from teacher-centric to student-centric, moving from the thought of a single lesson or a single unit to iterative learning,
right?
Ipsative learning, right? So iterative, doing the same thing over and over in different ways. Ipsative, referring back to what you previously did and churning it up again. And then we talked about moving away from focusing on content to focusing on skills,
right?
And not pretending that content isn't important,
right?
Right, especially in some subjects more than others.
Sure.
But that the focus is the underlying skills, and then the last one, moving away from isolation into collaboration, and not just students, like teachers, and even that kind of metaphysical, like I'm not talking to you, but I'm collaborating with the spirit of you. What did you do? What can I pass on to the next person? Right? Then we're not in a vacuum. And it made me think. So I was lucky to go to India about 8 or 9 years ago and teach at some conferences.
Wow.
Yeah, it was incredible. It was called the Humanizing Education series. They do them in India. It was specific to Waldorf education, but not everybody was Waldorf coming to them. So it's kind of this. It's like, this is the EduProtocols mindset.
Right.
But if you don't use EduProtocols, it's still just good teaching.
Right.
And so there was an anthroposophic doctor. Anthroposophy is like the Waldorf medicine.
Okay.
We'll just go with that.
Okay.
It's much more. But it's a form of medicine and looking at the human being and the interconnection of maladies and things like that. And the doctor that was there is highly regarded, right? Like people were in awe that she was there that year. And I'm like, oh, what was your name? Like, I don't know what you are.
That's always
but she told this really beautiful story. So she was a native of Hyderabad, India. And then she had moved to Australia, like did her residency and was based there. See, I'm so excited. I'm like gasping. So she was asked to come back to like run a pediatric hospital.
Okay.
And she was like, okay, but if you're going to have me come back, and this was not like an anthroposophic hospital, this was the hospital, like the pediatrics hospital. Because she's also, I believe, a cardiologist, I think is her formal training.
Oh.
And so she came back and she's like, okay, but if we're going to do this, we're going to do it my way. And one of the things that she did was, to go to isolation versus collaboration. She got like cubicle hell, as I understand it, right? Like we've seen these like data processing centers, right? Like a big giant room full of cubicles.
Yeah.
And she stripped doctors of their offices and she made them all work in the cubicle center.
Whoa.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
And because what she said is she was, and if a child came in with, I'm just going to make this up, a heart condition.
Sure.
Okay. She required a certain number of other specialists to weigh in because she was like, well, yeah, the child has a heart condition, but what are the kidneys doing?
Right.
And what is psychiatrically happening?
The body all works
and what
together,
is
right?
nutrition happening? And that's kind of the heart of anthroposophic medicine. It's looking at the whole of the child, the whole of the human being. And I've thought about that so much in education. Like, I'm teaching parallel structure and grammar.
Right.
And Stephanie is teaching the periodic table. But like, I can't pretend that those are separated in the brain of a child.
Sure.
Right. And so I love that idea of like, what does the in Dutch. Oh, we have a Dutch listener. If you're the Dutch
We do?
listener, yeah, it keeps showing up on
That's so
our
cool.
thing. If you're from the Netherlands, reach out because I want to know who you are.
This guy.
And so they have this funny saying, and I'm going to butcher it, and this person's going to reach out for me. And they say like, "Wat weet bakker van de grote boer?" It's like, what does the baker know of the farmer?
Okay.
Right, and it's that idea of like, do what you do well,
Right.
and know that somebody else is doing what they do well, and work together with that person.
Right.
Right. So like,
You need the quality wheat to make the bread, to make the flour.
You know, it's all interconnected. Ooh. Oh, I feel like I've just run my mouth today.
Ooh,
I could talk about this forever.
We've jumped into some really deep topics.
I know.
This was intense.
It's also like here, not in isolation, right?
Right.
I just came from teaching at the academy.
Right. You're on fire.
I'm on fire, and I'm getting ready. I'm making shifts.
Yeah.
Ipsative, right? I'm looking at what I taught.
Totally.
How am I shifting it for a different population in California than the Midwest? They're different. We are different out here.
Yep, we are.
And so it is on fire, but it is passionate to me. I'm certain this is coming through on the microphone, right? Like I'm literally gasping at some point. I could talk to this forever.
Yep.
That the mind shift is where we have to go.
Yeah.
To go back to Ted Dintersmith's, inflammatory response. It's not that we need to do what we've been doing better. It's that we need to do better things.
Yeah.
And I think that this is along the path to do that. And I also want to just bring up, like, I get a lot of weird cross-eyed looks when I say, no, the education system actually isn't broken.
Yeah.
Like those are fighting words right now, right? Because it hurts. Education hurts. Hurts to be a teacher.
It does.
It's not broken.
No.
It's doing exactly what it was designed to do.
Yep.
But we don't like that output anymore, and we haven't retooled. We haven't,
Right.
They revamped it. I am not good at this history, but like the Rockefellers and all of them went over to Prussia and looked at what was happening after World War I, and they were, making soldiers. That's what they were doing. It's a factory model.
Absolutely.
And then they brought it back here because it worked really well to train people to go into the factory.
Ringing bells.
Yeah. But that's not the world that we live in anymore.
Right.
Right? We can't be isolative and teach that way. We have to collaborate and look at the future. Somebody else said it. I'm not going to quote this because I don't know who it is. But they said, like, if we continue to teach for now,
Right.
we rob them of the future.
Oh, yeah. I have heard that.
It's out there somewhere. But like, we need to teach towards the future.
Right.
While still honoring the past that we've come from.
Right.
And that's, I think, to be EduProtocol specific for just a moment, because, I'm wearing the hat and the t-shirt right now.
Right.
To teach EduProtocol specific, the EduProtocols are frameworks for teaching, but the EduProtocols themselves, the entirety of the system, is just a framework.
Just a framework.
Right? It's not content specific. You don't have to use an Iron Chef and a Cyber Sandwich and a Fast and Curious and a Thin Slide and a Thick Slide Study Guide and all of these things. You can. They're beautiful. It's a framework that we as teachers can use to have iterative instruction in our classroom and not have to reinvent all the wheels.
Yep.
But the reality is they are only a bucket for a frame of mindset and a frame of reference. That, in my experience, has lightened the load, has moved the needle. Students are progressing. We see it all the time. People come into the Facebook community group and they're like, oh my gosh, like, check out my iReady scores. And not to shame my colleagues, but it's way higher than their scores.
Big numbers.
And there's like a sadness around that in the community.
Yeah.
Of like, hey, like, this isn't the only way, but hell, it's a way.
It's a way.
Okay, I could talk about this all day, but we should wrap it up. So let's just reiterate four key shifts in education that you can find by following an EduProtocols way.
Yep.
Moving from teacher-centric to student-centric. Moving from single lesson or unit or lesson path to iterative learning.
Right.
Mass reps, not drill and kill.
Right.
And then moving from content to skill focus.
Right.
And lastly, removing isolation and moving into collaboration, and not just students.
Not just students.
Collaborating student to teacher, teacher to teacher, student to student, parent to classroom, building, we say community, but sometimes we don't mean it.
Right. Yeah. I've definitely been in some vertical groups that we're not about. It's like required by the district that you get together and do a vertical group, but it's just really not collaborative.
Yep.
We're not used to that.
We're not.
And we don't really trust each other. Like, the saying of like avoiding the staff room.
Oh yeah.
Just avoid the staff room because it's full of toxicity and like teachers tearing down students, teachers tearing down each other. And it's because the profession really is deeply frustrating and it is deeply broken.
And painful.
And it's painful. And so I don't even judge people that do that.
No.
But we can't keep moving this way. We can't keep doing the same thing and expecting different results.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
What do you know?
All right.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for joining us.
A lot of passion today.
Oh, yeah.